I think it's a very fair opinion to say that Rachel Reeves' budget has been absolutely disastrous, and there's enough information and indicators now to prove that to be the case. But first of all, you're with me, Daniel Shensmith. I am a barrister, the black belt barrister, but this is my money channel, so I'll be really grateful if you subscribe here too. I've realized that my money channel and my law channel and my secrets channel all kind of have a little bit of an overlap, but here, specifically talking about money and how it affects you and the economy, because ultimately this channel here is to help you create wealth and avoid what is ultimately going to be a disastrous set of consequences for every single person, not just in the UK, but if these impact factors affect you around the world as well. So I'll be really grateful if you subscribe to the channel. It's growing nicely, so thank you very much for that. So what's going on here? So with the UK pound being at the lowest in 14 odd months, that is due to gilt yields rising very rapidly. Now, to put that in very simple terms, all that means is that government borrowing costs are increasing. Therefore, the government is going to have to pay more to investors to borrow money. This is going to increase the cost of servicing the national debt. Now, I'm thinking of doing another video on national debt and to whom it's owed and all of this sort of stuff. And when we talk about the deficit and reducing the deficit and what all of this means, I'll probably do that in a separate video. But in short, this is going to put pressure, therefore, on public finances because increased interest payments on government borrowing naturally is going to have a knock-on effect. And the government have to go into consider public finances, which is going to be one of the core aspects talked about in this video, and how I think it's going to collapse certain sectors, vital sectors and operations around the country. More about that in a minute. Specifically, I'm talking about courts because it really is quite disastrous. And I'm not just exaggerating for effect. But this is also going to have a knock-on effect on mortgage rates and loans, mortgage payments, which in turn, it's going to have a negative impact on businesses. As I mentioned, there's pressure on the pound and the value of the pound and overall decreased confidence in the economy and certainly economic growth. And putting all of that together, naturally, it's going to have an impact on pensions. So let's come to some articles. But first of all, it is quite alarming to see when we see headlines that suggest that insiders believe that Keir Starmer will brutally, as in this headline here, sack Reeves to save himself. So you can go and find these articles on the Telegraph and various places. But also headlines such as Britain is now a poor country and it's about to get even poorer. But here's a very sad and telling line. After 20 years of low to no growth, we've fallen from the former status of having near the highest GDP per capita in the world. Now, of the 40 or so developed countries, we are in the bottom half. And this is really doomed to get even worse, because if we look at this in a very simplistic fashion, if we have no growth as an economy, but it is an increasing population, not just because our population is increasing naturally, but because of immigration, and therefore more and more people coming into the country, but businesses are going to be hit by increased taxes, therefore there may be fewer jobs, few lower output, and businesses may be offshoring their operations. Overall, that is a shrinking of the economy with a growing of the population, and therefore we are going to become a poorer and poorer country. Not only that, Rachel Reeves has been criticised in a disastrous handling of the economy, leading to thousands of pounds in mortgage increases. Because immediately on publication of the budget, the Office for Budget Responsibility changed their forecast from mortgage rates of 3.8% for the first quarter of 2025 and updated that to take into account her budget and said that rates would be at 3.9% for the same period, meaning people could be spending anything from £1,000 to £3,000 or £4,000 extra on their mortgage, depending on their situation. And as a mortgage advisor in a previous sort of line of work, I can tell you that a budget which has a disastrous effect on the economy and businesses is naturally going to have an effect on interest rates, which will obviously affect your mortgage. Therefore, if you are looking to move, buy, remortgage, and so on, you're going to have to be very careful indeed and shop around. And you may have to make decisions not to move and stay put at least until things have changed somewhat. Because otherwise, every thousand or few £1,000s here or there is going to make a massive difference to you. If you are, for example, looking to get out of debt, looking to put money away as savings and an emergency fund, much of which I've talked about in other videos, so I'll link some of those below. I actually have a budgeting spreadsheet where you can map each and every expenditure and, of course, your income, and you can offset them all. And it will tell you in the spreadsheet in a brutally honest format exactly what you have left after all of your expenditure. And it will probably highlight to you, as this government should be doing, will really highlight to you where all of the expenditure is going and what are the most expensive things that you are spending money on. If you want that spreadsheet, it is on my website, blackbeltbarrister.com. I might set up other websites at some point with danielshansmith.com, but at the moment you'll find it on blackbeltbarrister.com. I think you have to sign in, and then it's on the downloads page. I will try to make it obvious to link to, but it is on there. It's been on there for some time now. I've got a video going through that spreadsheet in great detail with 2 very good ways of eliminating debt. And eliminating debt is really your first stage to creating wealth, with your income being your most valuable and powerful wealth creation tool. Because most people don't have a huge successful business. Most people don't have a massive stock portfolio or property portfolio or whatever. So for most of you, your income is going to be your most valuable wealth creation tool. If you combine that with eliminating debt, all of your debt first, and then ultimately your mortgage, and then you are debt free, and then you can really roll that money in to creating more wealth. That spreadsheet is on my website. But as I said, mortgages are going to be affected by this, so you need to be very vigilant. But also by what seems to be an internal letter, the cabinet has been told that spending cuts must be ruthless. Now, this is, for me, the proof that this is absolutely disastrous, and certain areas of governance are going to fall down and crumble, and certain bodies and framework throughout the UK are absolutely at risk here. This internal letter, apparently, about Rachel Reeves' spending review, seen by the Telegraph, so caveat, it's seen by the Telegraph, I'm reporting on the reporting, admits that difficult decisions on budgets will be needed. Now, that's code for they're going to stop spending money and reduce spending money where absolutely they need to spend that money, and the things that they spend it on, we can't really do without. I'll come back to that in just a moment. Now, this comes back to interest rates on 30-year government bonds being at the highest point since 1998. Again, coming back to being more expensive to borrow money for the government has a knock-on effect on all of the other things. Now, this does say that they are focusing on certain things. The focus, of course, in all the talking points has been to reduce NHS waiting lists, boost early education, more police officers on the street. Arguably, they want to raise household income. Now, I would argue that that's not going to happen based on all of the things and the reasons that I've said. Everybody in some way or another is going to be spending more and potentially even earning less because of all of the changes. More about that in just a second. But one of their talking points is to raise household income. They also want to build 1.5 million homes. But those homes we're talking about, there's a very real argument as for whom these homes are really being built, because they are looking at housing millions of migrants that are coming to the UK that foreseeably is going to be very difficult to remove them, or many of them going to stay here because their asylum claims will be successful. Not going to debate the philosophies of that here, and certainly not the law. That's for my main channel, Black Belt Barrister. I've done that in quite some detail. But also this decarbonize the electricity supply and everything else to be well financed. Now, all of these things are going to cost a lot of money. Obviously, everyone should really support a well-funded health system that works well. But there's a lot of criticism about spending money on the NHS when a lot of money is wasted. I can personally tell you, I won't be naming names, but I can personally tell you that a lot of money is wasted in the NHS. Very often they will open an implement which costs thousands of pounds, and it's the wrong one because the person that did it wasn't trained properly or whatever, and therefore it's thousands of pounds just gone like that because they weren't trained properly and didn't know how to do it and opened the wrong thing perhaps, or they used it incorrectly or whatever. I've heard various stories like this. But then we look at what they call unprotected areas and government departments. Now, unprotected areas and government departments, these are areas that are not necessarily ring-fenced for money and in some sense segregated from the rest of spending and budgeting and so on. These other areas include things such as courts and local councils and welfare support and so on. Now, on the one hand, you might think that many people are claiming welfare support and otherwise known as benefits in general. You may have the view that a lot of people claiming benefits really shouldn't be, and that benefit spending is perhaps out of control and needs to be reduced, and people should be at work instead of claiming benefits. That's a rather cynical view. On the other hand, I have been sent some fairly horrendous photographs of people that say that they cannot walk, they cannot move because of their disabilities. And from the photographs I've seen, they are genuine disabilities. They literally, in the state that they are in, with no disrespect to them, they cannot get up, they cannot walk, they cannot do very much. So aside from jobs that are work from home that they are suitably qualified for, which may be few and far between, they are simply unable to do anything about it. But they will have their funding cut. And then what are they supposed to do? If they can't get up and get out and they can't pay for support to come in, they are quite literally going to be rotting at home because they won't have any support. That is just looking at benefits and welfare support. But what about the courts and local authorities? Now, we've seen many local authorities around the country supposedly declaring bankruptcy. Now, they can't technically declare bankruptcy. They just have to declare a state that they cannot continue in the way that they currently are. Therefore, they must have a meeting. They must decide expenditure. They must cease expenditure until they've had this meeting and decided what's going on and so on. And many of them just don't have the money to do anything else. That's why many areas around, for example, Birmingham, have seen streets littered and littered with bins, overflowing with rubbish bins and the like, because they've cut the amount of collections in those areas. However, aside from local authorities, which is bad enough, we come to the justice system, which I obviously have a particular vested interest in a sense that I am a lawyer. And so I have first-hand experience of what it's like for people to be waiting for justice. And we have a saying, which is justice delayed is justice denied. We even had criminal cases thrown out of court simply because of a delay in getting that case to court. It is a very valid argument that a case has been delayed so long is not fair either for the accused or for the victims involved. But the reason I've got this page on screen here, and this is a page from the National Audit Office, the Ministry of Justice ambition, it says, to reduce the Crown Court backlog of 67,500 cases. They aimed to reduce to 53,000 cases by March of this year, is not achievable. That is, despite increasing the number of sitting days for courts, this is no longer achievable. The MOJ publicly said its ambition to reduce the backlog in October 2021 spending review after being given £477 million to support recovery across the criminal justice system, including to help reduce court caseloads. However, this backlog is now higher than it was in 2021, and the MOJ estimates that the number will be closer to 64 by March 2025, but has not set a new ambition to reduce the backlog. And this is just Crown Court cases. This doesn't even take into account magistrates' court cases, or certainly not civil cases. Now, we've had many very serious offences waiting several years to get to court. All the while, the victims of those crimes, or more properly, the complainants in those cases, waiting to come to court to give evidence against the accused in those cases, taking many years to get to court in many situations. And so with courts being described as an unprotected government department that may be at risk of further cuts, these backlogs are just going to get out of control. But more fundamentally, and I have to reiterate again, that tax, and more tax is not the way to increase a business, because increasing tax burden on businesses is going to reduce their capacity to employ people. They are going to have to put prices up to account for their net profits, because they have a net operating profit that they need to meet. Otherwise, they will go out of business. And that has been the detriment of many private schools, because slapping 20% on those fees, it is too simplistic to say that the parents can afford the 20% if they can afford the fees. That is absolutely not the case in many different cases, because many parents, in fact, I think the vast majority of parents, I don't have statistics to hand to back it up, but I think the vast majority of parents sending children to private school are working multiple jobs to enable that to happen, and they cannot afford 20% on top of it. Likewise, the schools cannot afford to take into account and just make their fee inclusive of VAT, because they are also hit in most cases with the loss of business rates relief, meaning that these schools are paying hundreds of thousands of pounds a year extra on top of what they're already paying for taxes. And of course, the vast majority of their costs are with staff wages, meaning obviously they will be paying increased employer national insurance, including at the lower threshold. So increasing tax on these businesses is obviously going to harm those businesses. And you need to think of the economy, this government needs to think of the economy as one large business. There are things that it does that cost them money, and there are things that it does that makes money. And if you are spending more than you make, you are in a deficit, and that is going to be detrimental to the economy. So what can we learn from this, and how can this help you in your personal situation? Well, while I will help you and guide you through what's going on with this economy and how this budget is affecting the economy, we can learn the lessons whilst we're talking about this, about your own personal finances. Creating wealth very much is about looking at your income and your outgoings. And the very first thing that you can look at is cutting the unnecessary outgoings. Now, when it comes to the government, and indeed, I think when it comes to yourself and your own family personal finances, I think it's a bit like that situation on the aircraft that is in trouble. You need to be fastening your own oxygen mask first before you can help somebody else. If you are not fit to survive yourself, you can't be looking after somebody else. And so you need really to look at where you're spending money and cut those so that it is protecting yourself. And then you can start to eliminate those debts and really start to create wealth. As for this government, they need to be looking at spending money and taking care of the UK first. And instead of looking further afield on humanitarian projects, if we cannot afford to do those things, we need to be taking care of ourselves first. When respectfully, I think, in my opinion, when Keir Starmer talks about fixing the foundations, that's exactly what we need to be doing. But the way we need to be doing it is by not spending it on other people. And that includes people that come into the country that are coming in illegally. We need to have swift ways of returning them where they are safe. For example, where they've come from France, they were safe in France. That needs to be dealt with France. But also international humanitarian aid and so on. Whilst it's all well and good to be assisting foreign nations, if it's money we don't have and it's to the detriment to our own country, all that means is eventually we won't be able to do that. And either we will be essentially bought out and owned by another country, or it's going to mean that we just can't do that anymore and we will be worse off for it. Whereas if we do really fix the foundations and we take care of our own country first, then we'll be in a position to generate wealth, and then we can help others. Because if you have taken care of your own finances first and then you start to create wealth, then you can lavish that wealth upon somebody else without it affecting your daily life. And in terms of the country, that means the daily running of the country. And the two will work in a very similar way. But in my humble view, I think we have members of this cabinet who don't have the requisite experience in running a business and therefore possibly just don't understand this. But let me know what your thoughts and comments in the box below. These are very, very dangerous times we have, with potential cuts to essential services that appear to be described as unprotected areas of funding. Let me know what you think. Please do subscribe here. This is my money channel. I'd love for this to grow as well, and share my monetary thoughts with you here. And as always, thank you for watching.